We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for reality radio as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night. Only on 919.
Hey everyone, happy Friday. You're listening to 919. My name is Jack Devnarain and this is Reality Radio. It's as real as it gets every Friday night where we have a guest live in studio to talk about the incredible stories that shaped their remarkable lives. Tonight, performance poet, writer, actress Lebo Mashile. Good evening. Welcome to our studio.
Oh, thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
What a privilege as well. It was amazing that you could be available to be here tonight with us.
Yeah, well, I was being interviewed by the amazing Yuveka Rangapha at Bricks TV yesterday on her lifestyle show, and she said, "You have to talk to Jack. You have to talk to Jack. I did a show. You have to talk." She's such a connector. Like in the space of an hour, she had hooked me up with like 4 different people, 4 different things. So I'm grateful. I mean,
you see, Yuveka's problem is that she thinks she's a better connector than me.
Who's the connector between the two of you? Who's the real one?
Yeah, no, I'm the one who had to connect her to her. So,
hey, you had her acting.
That's
Jack.
right. That's right.
That's incredible.
And she was as well.
You know, I worked with Yuveka for 5 years. When we did Great Expectations together. That's why I love her so much. We did a mommy show, parenting and pregnancy show for ETV. We were co-anchors.
Yeah.
I had just had a baby when I started. Yuveka was pregnant with her second child when she started.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were in the trenches together.
I love that.
Coming from very different worlds, you know, because she comes from in-depth news
Yes,
for many years,
journalism,
hardcore journalism for years. And I was coming more from arts, arts, media, entertainment. But I mean, we vibed with each other so well, and I'm so happy for her. When she said she was acting, I was like, what?
Yes. You know, I love the fact that she reinvented herself because she had the courage to do that.
Yes.
And that's something that I wanted to ask you about as well, because going back, you're about 16 years old. You were in the US, right? And now you return with your family to South Africa at a time of transition, right? And another government of national unity as it was back then, right?
I'm getting flashbacks. I think we're all getting flashbacks of PTSD a bit. Yeah.
What was that like coming back to South Africa, your home, your roots, your people?
Yeah.
And what did that mean to you as a young woman, as an activist as well back then?
Back then I didn't know that I was an activist. I'd grown up with a family that's full of activists, which is how my parents ended up outside. My father left South Africa to go and study engineering. He left like in the late 60s. He was 19. They were babies literally when they left. My mother was a student activist at the University of the North in 1976. So she had to leave, you know. She ended up in the US in 77. They met in 78. I followed shortly thereafter.
You were born 79.
I was born 79. I came in. So I spent a bit of my formative years while my mom was still completing her studies. She sent me back to Soweto to stay with my grandparents. So my earliest memories of leaving South Africa as a small child, you know, arriving in this country where I'd been born, but I didn't know and I couldn't speak English. And then I went through primary school and high school. And by that time I was like firmly American, you know. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island. It's a town that's full of immigrants. So, I mean, there were kids from, I went to school with kids from Korea and Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic and Haiti and Jamaica. And, you know, but it was still America. All of us went home and ate our funny food and spoke our funny languages. But when we got to school, we talked about Bart Simpson and hip hop and Nike and, you know, it was America. And so I think at that, being forced to move at that age was extremely difficult because my parents' relationship was falling apart. They got divorced at that time. And my father just kind of absconded. Like he was not, I went from having a dad to not having a dad, which was crazy. So we were dealing with this incredible heartbreak. You know, we came back. My mom didn't have a job at that time. We were staying in my grandparents' back room in Soweto. And my sister and I were going to school at Sacred Heart here in Observatory, you know. So we were making that like road trek across, you know, from the township through town into the burbs, you know. And I mean, at the time, I didn't realize that was so symbolic of the experiences that so many people were having. You know, that apartheid kind of is that, because of the spatial design of apartheid, I feel like we are constantly moving across physical, psychological, emotional borders, right?
And you've got to adapt to each of these places.
You're one way at home, you're one way at school, you have an accent for home, you have an accent for your teachers, you know. So in the middle of that heartbreak, that like implosion of our family, then I find myself in this incredible country. I mean, that's going through this monumental transition, and culture is exploding. Youth culture is exploding. Black people are playing sport. Like, people are celebrating the Rugby World Cup and the African Cup of Nations, and Kwaito is exploding, and there's black people on TV, and the shows like Isidingo, where you see things that you never thought you would see. What? Like, whoa. So, there was this tension, this push and this pull between the real trauma that I was experiencing, but just the excitement of what was happening, and the newness of it. I couldn't, I was being fed, it was like an immersive experience. My mom got a job working for the Department of Housing, and then she bought a house in Yeovil, which was amazing. Those were some of the best years of my life. Yeovil was, at that time, was like, it's always been a hub for immigrants, and that time it was like rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief. We stayed across the street from Lebo Mashile and a corrupt cop, and my Afrikaans teacher was next door. Like two houses away. You know what I mean? There were sex workers this side, like low key, but we knew they were working. And the working ladies really helped us because they were always there. Our house never got broken into, with Yeovil being what it is. Like the one time I think somebody jumped the wall and they took like garden furniture or whatever, but we never experienced being broken into, being robbed, because they were always there. There was always somebody watching. So
I love that, because I know that there's a story about the sex workers as well, also to do with us as artists.
Yes.
And I'm going to pick up on that because we're going to take a short break now. We'll be back. And this is where everything is just going to take off, because we're going to talk arts and the industry just after this.
919 has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, programming that is not harmful to children and that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. If you think we're not living up to that code, you can inform the BCCSA. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa to PO Box 412-365, Craig Hall 2024. Or email the BCCSA at napsa.co.za. For more information, visit the bccsa.co.za. We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for reality radio, as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919.
It's Lebo Mashile on reality radio this Friday night with me, Jack Devnarain. There was one of your performances with performance poetry, and you were reflecting on how, as performers, we are so much like prostitutes who has to put out their body, their emotions. You've got to check what it is you're selling.
Yes.
And you've got to make this accessible to people as an audience to allow yourself to be vulnerable in that way. And I wanted to ask, when did you see that similarity?
When did I make the connection between the two?
Yeah.
Okay, so when we were staying in Yeovil and the sex workers were next door, because at that time, the people would come to Yeovil to look for everything, for drugs, for sex, and we were girls in school uniform and we being accosted by men who were coming looking for sex workers.
Oh, man.
But who could very clearly see that we are children, right? So, it would freak me out. And the ladies next door, they noticed, and the one lady was like, "You can't let these men mess you around."
Yeah.
She was like, memorize their license plate and shout it back at them, because they know once you have their license plate, you can go to the cops and figure out who they are.
Yeah.
And then I started doing that, So I've been empowered by sex workers.
Yeah.
And then when I got into the business, I think I always felt it like we are transacting with something very sacred, but that gets treated like just like we're raw materials, when you mine deep within yourself, you have to find a very sensitive connection in order to be able to do your work with other people, with audiences, with yourself, right? To make the work happen. And then, now you spend 3 months chasing an invoice with somebody who doesn't want to take your calls, right? So it's like, what is this? What is this? I did a piece a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic. I wrote a piece about Sarki Bartman called Venus versus Modernity, full-length production with an incredible vocalist, opera singer, actress named Anne Masina. She was in Ushaka Ilembe. Remember Anne?
Oh, yes.
Anne!
Oh, come on.
I love Anne with all my heart. So when I was doing the research for Sarki, one of the things that really struck me, Sarki experienced human trafficking, exploitation, just on a scale that is like unfathomable.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Harrowing, absolutely harrowing. But when she was at the peak of her fame in London, she was doing 12 shows a day at Piccadilly Circus. She curated her own costume. Like, this was before she was displayed naked in human zoos, and she was still being exploited there by the guy who had trafficked her and bought her there and who was making all the money off of her. But she had curated her own costume. She was playing multiple indigenous instruments. She was singing in multiple languages. When the court case, so abolitionists got involved in Sarki's story because at that time the importation of slaves was illegal in England, right? Yeah. So then they used that to sue the guy who had brought her to England, who was making all the money off of her.
Ah, okay.
And then she testified in that case basically against herself, because the abolitionists asked her, "Are you a slave?" She said, "No, I'm not a slave. I'm an artist."
Yes, and then the dispute that went to court was about the terms of a contract.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And of course there was none.
Yeah.
So that case helped her get away from him. But what I found really interesting is that the only written testimony of her voice, and at that time she was easily the most famous entertainer / exploited person / woman, you know, in Europe. She influenced fashion. Like, she was a reference point for journalists and for political cartoonists, and her image was everywhere, but her voice was nowhere. And the only recorded testimony of her voice is in that court trial, where she testified in Afrikaans and said, "I am not a slave, I'm an artist."
Look at that.
And then I said, this is it. This is it. We are all Sarkis.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the line between feeling the sacredness and the empowering nature of what I do and feeling utterly exploited. Sometimes it's a knife's edge. We know that. You know what it is to dig deep and give something so precious and then be devalued as a human being. You know, people talk about, you know, how sex work is degrading, and I mean, it's debatable. If it was the only form of income that I had to feed my children, I would do it, because I mean, like, we talk about the sacredness of sex, but there's so many other things that are sacred that are commodities.
Right. That's right. And they are commodified because somebody's exploiting it somewhere along the line.
This is it.
So I wanted to ask you about this, because I was so impressed by how you embraced the lessons that we learned from Sarah Bartman.
Thank you.
It was also about how you approached the world, the industry of the arts.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, and you would have seen this also, where people come into it as if they're tourists. and they look around and they see themselves in everything, and they see how, what they should be earning and what they want to earn and how they want to be known, and which is the red carpet. And now, of course, it's social media.
Oh my gosh.
So at a certain time, though, you came in with a voice and a message, and it was about people taking ownership, taking agency of their place as responsible citizens.
Thank you.
And that message really resonated with me, because it also pointed to people's responsibility to the industry.
Thank you.
Where we do have, this is an honorable industry.
Yes.
This is a noble profession.
Yes.
Why are we not seeing this?
Yes. I mean, there's a number of theories about this, So you think about how film, technology, photography, the technology upon which our industry is built, the film industry is built. This is all technology that emerged during the Industrial Revolution. It also was the technology that was emerging during the time of colonial conquest.
Right.
So you look at the language that we use in film, shooting, capture. It's very violent colonial language, because these two kind of structures, or these two, I don't know, colonialism, imperialism is a force, but this industry was developing at a time when imperialism was at its peak.
Yeah.
And somehow we've imbibed this energy, this understanding of power in the way that we work. And especially in South Africa, because we still, I think, are undoing legacies of apartheid around issues of intellectual property.
Yes. Yes.
That the apartheid was very clear that artists, especially black, brown artists, you are raw materials. The stories that you hear about how session musicians would stand outside the window of Gallo every morning, right? They'd be there all dressed up, and then white producers would stand at the window and they'd point and say, okay, we need a bassist, you, we need a drummer, we need a guitarist, you.
Sure.
And then they'd get in there and they'd make these songs and get paid session fees and not own their intellectual property.
Unbelievable.
Right?
Yeah.
Even the fact that you think about, look at you, look the kind of, you've put decades into honing your craft, into creating shows that have become so deeply embedded in our lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? This character is synonymous with the show. You can't have the show without this human. So why are you not benefiting from the intellectual property? Yes. Every time this is screened, people are watching it in different parts of the continent. Yeah. Why are you not benefiting from that?
That's the big question.
You understand? And that's the standard in other parts of the world.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
right.
I think we have a kind of apartheid colonial hangover when it comes to valuing the creative industries and creative output from creative people.
You mentioned something interesting in your response, and you unfortunately, that phrase has been beaten to death by rent-seeking politicians who have just inserted themselves into our lives.
Rent-seeking politicians.
When they start to talk about the legacy of apartheid.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Typically, it's about
it's terrifying.
Offering some justification about why they failed in their own duty under their own mandate.
Facts.
And that sort of thing.
Facts.
When you and I talk about the legacy of apartheid, I have to say, just as a quick reflection, I've been working with a bunch of background actors who've been treated appallingly on one of the very big productions in Joburg, and this is due to a lack of oversight, very, very poor due diligence, completely pirate con artist agents.
Sure.
But the result is that a lot of these background actors are basically being trafficked.
It's horrendous.
And they didn't know it.
It's horrendous.
Now, when I showed them what was happening, and when I explained to them that this is devastating for you and your family and for the industry, their response was, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to lose this job.
Sure.
That for me is the legacy of apartheid. That for me is teaching people that silence, that not claiming your space, not speaking out, is going to somehow save you from a worse fate. How is that even possible? That we taught people not to speak out.
Harriet Tubman, very famous abolitionist and one of the most famous conductor on the Underground Railroad. She liberated hundreds, I think like nearly 1,000 people, right?
Sure.
She said, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if they knew they were slaves.
Oh, you see? Yeah. If only they knew.
If only they knew they were slaves.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. It's such a mind screw, because it's like, on the one hand, you know, the process of knowing, protecting, and honoring your own self-worth is a deeply individual journey, you know. Even for me, like standing up every morning, sending quotes out for people who ask for my services, insisting on my rate.
Yeah.
Like refusing, you know, I mean, obviously within reason, like, because, you know, we're creatives, we work different projects, have come with different funding, different agendas. The way that I work with artists is not the way that I work with corporates, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I am flexible, but there's a point beyond which I will not compromise.
Yeah.
And I know that many artists do, out of desperation.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't begrudge them that, hey, because this is doing what you have to do to survive.
Desperation is a physical condition, which I get. Like, if you don't have money at the end of the month to pay your bills, I get it, right? Yeah. But desperation is also a psychological and emotional condition. If you are desperate, you will operate out of desperation everywhere.
Even as an artist.
As an artist in your relationships, you know what I mean? So for me, I'm like I understand how this industry is designed in a way to make us feel like we are replaceable.
Yeah.
It's designed to make you feel like what you do is not special, even though we know.
Yeah.
Right?
We know.
But then when the screws are being driven into you, it really does a number on your self-worth.
Yeah.
And then this is the most unequal society on earth. So there's already financial pressure on everyone, even if you are, you know, stable and able to make a living doing what you do, right? Many of us come from families that rely on us, right? So, you know, there's always this pressure, and they know it, and they capitalize on it. And that's what keeps us also, I think, from acting collectively.
Yes.
I mean, during the COVID, you know, to have artists who have created work that has literally like been the soundtrack to our lives, that has defined our experience here on earth, work that has healed us, that's inspired us, that's inspired our kids. And then this person dies because they didn't have access to healthcare.
Yeah.
Somebody who's been working for decades.
Yeah.
An icons.
And they're known around the world. There are injustices that we will unpack. And it's not just in South Africa.
No.
I'm also going to ask you about your connections with the US, but we will be back and pick up the conversation with Lebo Mashile. This is Reality Radio.
They say nothing ever lasts. But what about the Fast and Furious franchise? Or showing Anaconda 2 for Friday Action Night? Or how Brooke is still forgiving Ridge Forrester like 50 seasons in? And then there's Burger King's Whopper Meal deal, which is still going strong. So get your hands on 2 flame-grilled Whoppers topped with the freshest ingredients, plus 2 portions of crispy golden fries and 2 bottomless drinks for only 130 Rand. Only at Burger King, where good things do last.
We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for Reality Radio, as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919.
You know, sometimes you should hear the conversations that happen while we're on our little break. But with Lebo in studio, there's always something to talk about. Tell me about your studies in law and international relations.
So off I went to Wits after finishing matric. I didn't know. Honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I think I told my parents at some point when I was very young that I wanted to be a doctor, and everybody was happy about that.
Yeah.
And then I realized, but I'm scared of blood, and this is the real deal, and I don't have the marks. So what am I gonna do? I was like, okay, let me do law. I did law and international relations. I think because I liked Ally McBeal or something, you know. I thought that I saw myself kind of doing those monologues.
And there was LA Law at the same time, right?
Yes, there was LA Law at the same time. And Law and Order.
Yes,
Also,
you remember.
Yes. So I thought, okay, this is it. And it was really interesting. Like in the beginning, I loved jurisprudence, the philosophy of law, the history of law, the influence of Roman Dutch law on South African law. And again, it was this interesting period of transition. So it was like in class, we were debating the new Abortion Act. You know, we were debating the laws that were undoing some of the structural problems of apartheid, right? These were all fresh. We were, you know, the Constitution was ratified at that time. And so it was exciting. And then, but as I got further along in my studies, and I remember looking at my final year criminal law paper, and it was like rape, robbery, and fraud. Yeah. And I was like, this cannot be my life. Yeah. This cannot be my life. International relations was interesting because I've always been very politically minded. I enjoyed that. Even that, I mean, both have been tremendously helpful, you know. Studying law taught me to always go through your contracts, be on top of the nuts and bolts of the agreements, right? And if I can't do it myself, enlist somebody who can. You know, it's important. And then international relations, I keep coming back to the things that I learned there about power, about these kind of global relationships. I mean, that is like an ongoing influence and reference in my life and in my work. So I'm grateful for what I studied, but at some point I was like, this is not going to be what I do. No. I discovered the Johannesburg underground art scene at that time. Yes. Of course, being in Yeovil and clubbing and being at uni. And I started going to poetry sessions just with friends. I'd never been. I'd never known. And I'd kept a journal. I'd kept a journal from childhood. I was writing poetry and shoving it under my bed, you know, in the mattress. That's between beautiful. The base and the mattress. And I didn't even know that what I was writing was poetry until I saw somebody stand on stage, and I was like, people get up and read their journals to other people?
Yes, but it's private.
But it's private. Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean? And I couldn't get enough, and I chased it around town. You know, from campus to a club called Jungle Connection in Doornfontein, next to what was Wits Tech then, what is now University of Johannesburg, to Newtown, to club places in like 206 and Monday Blues, and worked up the courage eventually to do it myself, and I haven't stopped.
I remember at one point you had mentioned you were majoring in law and international relations and minoring in guys and weed.
Yes. By the end, that's how it was.
I love that.
That was when the poetry bug kicked in. Like when I knew I was going to be an artist, it was like, okay. I handed the degree to my mother, and I was like, I'm off to do my own thing. She was like, I paid for a lawyer.
Yes.
And my grandmother would call, and she would pray over the phone. She'd be like, I love it. You're so spoiled. What are you doing to my daughter? They've spent so much money putting you through school. What are you doing? You're going to be broke. Yes. You're going to make a mess of everything in your life. And then, you know, but I'm grateful though, because my family they've been such big champions and support systems. I'm a single mom. I travel a lot for work. You know, right now my kids are with my uncle. You know, when I was on the road last week, my kids were with my sister.
I heard it's your boy's birthday today.
It's my boy's birthday on Monday. Monday. They share a birthday. My boy and my mom share a birthday. So happy birthday. Happy birthday, so
from
happy
Reality
birthday,
Radio.
Papa. If I didn't have my family, and if they didn't believe in what I do, I wouldn't have been able to do it all these years. So, I mean, things do come full circle. I had to push, though. It forced me to, and I think those kind of battles are really essential because you're going to come up against that repeatedly in life, especially as a creative, where you have something inside of you that you need to express, create, manifest, do, and everybody around you is just like, no, that's impossible. No, it's never been done before. No, you're crazy. How many times have you heard you're crazy in your career, you know? So having to push past that in my 20s gave me the muscle to realize, like, oh, it's okay for everybody to disagree with you.
Did you realize that at a tender age, when you were journaling, that you were actually investing in the power of words?
Sure. Language has saved my life. My favorite books have pulled me out of darkness, depression, toxic relationships, trauma. I mean, I think about, what The Color Purple meant for my life at that time when my family was splitting up and we were moving back. That book became like a Bible for me. I still come back to books like The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, right? Yeah. I still come back. Even in workshops that I do, I still reference it. There's so many. So, I mean, my books are my friends, they're a sacred part of me. And I feel really, when I did my first book, I felt like, I'm not ready for a book. What do you mean? Because a book was such a big thing in my mind.
Oh, and being an author is a huge thing.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. And I thought, no. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to be that thing that I hold so close, It's a beautiful thing to be, I think every writer is a reader, If you really are a writer, you have to be a reader, It starts there, that love of words. There's a beautiful thing that happens, though, becoming an author and having people have that kind of relationship with you, It's been amazing to see the shift that I have been a part of in South African poetry. The landscape of poetry changed after me and the writers of my generation emerged. There were virtually no Black women publishing poetry, So and now in the last 20 years, there's been an explosion.
Oh, I see.
Across
I love that.
genres.
I love that.
And that I find really beautiful.
Is it also because I know you've expressed before that you said poetry is the crown jewels of literature.
Yes.
And you think now people are awakening to that?
I think that what we do as poets, storytellers, actors, performers, I feel like it's an essential human function.
Yeah.
That no matter what technology exists, whether society is going through an industrial revolution or a technological revolution, whether people are living in caves or castles or whatever's happening, we need art. We need that mirror.
We need, what it is.
When people want to know how to understand something, how to get through difficulty, how to connect to something deeper than themselves, they turn to art. Yeah. They turn to language. They turn to performance. They turn to music. I mean, there's no religion on the planet that doesn't incorporate these elements into its own collective worship practices and rituals, right? So there's something eternal about what we do. People often ask me like, oh, do you feel like poetry is declining? Do you feel like people care less about reading? And I feel like I feel so lucky because very early in my career, I was mentored by Don Matera and Khositsile, who ended up becoming friends for decades. And it was such a privilege. I didn't realize it at the time, but what they gave me was the gift of also seeing artists in their 60s, in their 70s, killing it. Died with his manuscript on his lap.
Man.
Bro, Don died with the whole volumes and volumes of unpublished work. Like, there's enough work that Don has left behind to publish like a dozen books, Yeah. So to see people who were elders, but who were still artistically vital, made me realize in my 20s that what the industry is telling me about this little tiny shelf life that you have as an artist, as a performer, as an actress, as a presenter on screen is a lie.
Yeah.
What we are in the business of the eternal.
They've manufactured that for their own purposes.
Yes.
I wanted to ask whether you are following US politics in any way, because I have to say what worries me is to see the growing tide of people who actually think that history needs to be retold in certain manipulated ways, that books, certain books should be burnt. I'm seeing all this unfold, and I'm thinking, are we still holding the US as this glowing example of democracy and rational thinking? And really,
I think the empire is crumbling before our eyes, isn't it?
Are you seeing the same thing then?
And it's imploding, right?
I think that's what I'm seeing as well.
I think it's the things that America has been built on for a very long time coming to roost, you know? And there are very critical voices of what is happening in America, and always have been, from within America and outside of America. But we don't hear those voices because they won't put those voices on CNN. You know what I mean? So,
no.
So the whitewashing of history, they don't want kids to learn about slavery. They don't want kids to learn about Jim Crow.
Yes.
You know, they don't want kids to learn about aspects of America's history that are foundational to its identity. They want to erase that and act like it never existed.
Yeah, like the Civil War wasn't about slavery.
No, it was about economics.
Yes.
It was about the fight between the Industrial Revolution and the agriculture people there in the South.
Exactly.
Who were making money off of free labor.
Yeah, and complaining at the cost of slaves. They were so high. Do you know what it cost me as a slave owner?
You know what it cost me to feed them, to clothe them, to maintain them? Yeah, it's scary. You know, we are so advanced in terms of our conversations around race in this country. We take it for granted.
Yeah.
Things that are taboo, I find especially in the West, in Europe, in the UK, in the US in particular, South Africa, everything is on the table. We talk about everything. Not that we have a solution for everything, but we talk about it. It's there. Like somebody has said it, you know, and so I think I honestly think that as with all of our chaos and our dysfunctions, I think that in terms of race discourse, globally, South Africa is a leader, and we don't take that. We don't give ourselves credit for that. Look at what they're doing to this baby, to Tyler. It makes me so angry.
Yes. What's happening with that now?
Oh, so she now has opted out of discussing her identity. She did the Breakfast Show, the big podcast with Charlemagne, and they asked her again about her colored identity, and then her management. She turned ever so politely to the people behind her, representing her. And they came and somebody said from the background, no, she won't be answering that question. Please ask her another one. Good. How dare you decide to tell this kid who she is?
Yeah. Why do you need to fit them into the box? That's something you also write about fitting people into boxes in order to identify them, in order to have a handle on them.
Why is your definition of blackness in America, why does it have to be everybody's?
Yeah.
And your definition was also born out of the trauma of slavery. We've got our own traumas. We've got our own stuff here. You know, colored people are people. They are, and it's an identifiable culture. It's diverse also. What coloredness is in the Cape is not what it is in Durban. It's not what it is in Joburg. You know, it means different things. And it's for colored people to define their own identity. Who are we to decide?
Absolutely. Yeah. Fewer boxes, people. More reality radio. That's what we're going to come back to. Short break. We'll be back with Lebo just after this.
919 has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, programming that is not harmful to children and that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. If you think we're not living up to that code, you can inform the BCCSA. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa to PO Box 412365, Craig Hall 2024, or email the BCCSA at napsa.co.za. For more information, visit the bccsa.co.za. We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for reality radio as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919.
And we're back. Reality radio on a Friday night on 919. It's what we do every Friday night from 6 to 7 p.m. Tonight, live in studio, Lebo Mashile. A lot of your work reflects a certain responsibility to our ancestors and our ancestry. Why is that such an important element in your thinking and your creative side?
Sure. What an amazing question. I credit my spiritual awakening to the transition coming back to South Africa. Oh. That's what grounded me in understanding this connection to our ancestors. My grandparents were the generation, they were from Sophia Town, and then they got relocated to Soweto. You know, that generation was very much about trying to assimilate into the life of the city. You know, they were Christians, they were good Anglicans, they went to church. My mother grew up in the Anglican church, and my mother thought church was boring, and then she became an activist. So did my dad. They were both raised Anglican, but they thought church was boring, and you know, they thought like they were also like, you know, like influenced by Marxism. Religion is the opium of the masses, blah blah. So we weren't forced to go to church. My younger sister Tsepo went to church on her own, and my parents didn't stop her. They thought it was cool. So I didn't grow up with the there's a lot of blessings from going to church. I think so many amazing artists and musicians have come out of the training that they got in the church, right? So, I mean, sometimes I feel like I missed out on that, but I didn't get the kind of baggage of religious indoctrination. So when we came to South Africa and that reverence for ancestors, the influence of it on people's lives, it's such a palpable thing, you know? It felt like I couldn't run away from it, but it also felt like it made sense, right? That to make sense of myself, I had to go into the past. I had to understand my family. How did we get here? What are the dynamics that have made this, you know? So my entry point into understanding and the connecting to the ancestors, ancestor veneration, was very practical. It was like, how do I understand myself and what is happening in my life right now, you know? And that has become a tremendous gift in my life. I mean, I think that for me personally, I'm not particularly interested in what religion a person is. I tend to find myself drawn to people who have a belief in a higher power, a belief in something outside of themselves, a belief in you know, the fact that we are multisensory human beings, you know, that we exist beyond this temporal physical plane, right? Yeah. So I feel like for me, that's my GPS towards healthy living, clarity, peace, grounding. It helps me understand that my story is just like a little blip, like a tangent on a much bigger tree and story, which also helps me to understand as well that what I heal and what I work on and what I transcend in this life has a very direct impact on my children.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something that you mentioned, you had said, I think it was in one of your performances, where you said that our ancestors have to see through our eyes.
Yes. Yes.
And it reminds you that you have a duty.
Yes.
In the way that you manage yourself, in the way that you live your life, in the code that you live by. And I always I wanted to get your thoughts here as well. I know that you feel stronger and more empowered as we age, right?
Yes, I do.
That is such a rare thing in itself, and it's so sad that it's rare.
It's very sad.
Because I think our cultures give reverence to those who are older.
Absolutely.
And that's something that we need to
But
treasure.
Capitalism doesn't.
No, as soon as your working life is finished, that's done with you.
You're disposable.
Yeah, we don't now you become a drain on our resources.
On our resources, yeah. You're chowing.
Do you feel that there is an increased urgency as you age to be braver?
Oh, I love
to be
that
stronger.
Question. Yeah, yes, I do. I think when I hit 40, it was like and people said that they told me that this would happen, that there's like a kind of crystallization, like a distillation that happens. You know, you start to, well, first you realize like, damn, I can't blame anybody for anything anymore. All these messes are mine. All these patterns are mine. And if I don't, do something about this, it's nothing will ever, no one is going to hand me the life that I want, and there's something really empowering about that. There's something really empowering also about not being afraid to set boundaries or to, I struggled with people pleasing for such a long time and wanting to make other people happy and needing approval. And, as I get older, I just, the need to do that. It's like, why did I spend so many years doing that? Why didn't I listen to myself? Why didn't I trust my intuition? So now it's like I'm practicing hearing myself, listening to myself, trusting my gut. And the more I do that, the more I lean into that, the better everything gets. The more my relationships improve, the more I'm able to trust my writing and the creative process, which is the creative process, the feeling of like you start a project and you're excited about it and then you get halfway through and you realize, oh my God, what am I doing? This is the worst thing ever. This is going to ruin my life. And you have to hit that point actually, because just beyond that point is resolution.
That's right.
So time kind of has given the gift of being able to see and observe these patterns, because the fear is consistent, the fear, the anxiety, the insecurity. It's not that I don't feel it. It's just that I've now learned over time that it's always going to be there. And overcoming it is the triumph. Right?
I realize we must never become immune to that fear and vulnerability, because that's what drives the artistic impulse.
And it means that you care.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
You got to care.
You got to care.
Yeah.
If the fear's not there, it means that you're now riding on ego. And that's the worst. Like to walk onto a stage with just your ego. I mean, you need a little bit of ego to get out there to say, hey,
fair enough.
I'm Jack. I gotta get out there. I gotta kill it. But you also need a healthy amount of fear, that anxiety, because that anxiety makes you vulnerable, and that vulnerability is what allows you to connect with people.
Over time, I realized in my own effort to overcome anxiety and all of that as a performer, I realized that as long as you have a message, as long as you have a story to tell, if you commit to that, you have completely removed yourself from the picture. You got no reason to be anxious.
I've got a message to deliver.
That's it.
I've got a purpose.
You gotta believe in that. You have to commit to the message.
Yes.
If you commit to that, there is no anxiety or fear that will hold you back.
Yeah, and this is the prayer that we say, like when when I work with other artists and dancers, and backstage when everybody's kind of holding hands, and we have a message to give to the people. We have gifts to give to the people. No matter how big the budget or small the budget is, like that is always the intention.
With the gift that you give to the people, I'd like to extend that idea and ask you, what is your gift to the world?
Oh, wow. So I think back when I was in that place in that transition out of university and figuring out how I want to be an artist and being told that I'll never be able to make a living as a poet, even by the people who love me the most on the planet, I realized, okay, I have an ability with language. I have an ability to connect with people. What can I do with these things? What real skills can come out of this? So that's when I realized, like, I can script. And I mean, then those were wild dreams. They were not things that I imagined that in a matter of a few years I would be doing.
Yes.
I was just saying to the universe, I could be a scriptwriter. I could write books. I could be a speechwriter. I could make things. I could produce stuff. I can act. I can work on TV. I mean, these were pipe dreams.
Yes.
I was a kid in Yeovil with a single mom. But then it happened, and I still feel that same sense of wonder and magic about what is possible when we claim our dreams and our desires. That when you say to the universe this is what I could do. This is what I want. And you write it down, and the power of an audacious dream.
Yeah,
I
love that.
It brings itself to light, and I feel like that's the essential nature of creativity. Like we have these ideas, we have these concepts, we have these visions that nobody else can see. Our job is to pour them out of ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to make something out of nothing. And that is crazy. Like it's absolutely crazy.
Absolutely.
But this is what we do over and over and over again.
That's why they call us crazy artists, right? Because not only do we dare to dream,
yes,
but we have a duty to bring those dreams to life.
And this is what makes us dangerous, is that I think people connect to us because somewhere in the subtext of what we do is that message, right?
Yeah.
If you had to sprinkle that message to 8 billion people on the planet, that you can bring your dreams to life, you can create the society that you want.
Terrifying.
Absolutely. That's why we are marginalized all over the world.
Yeah.
Because we're a threat.
Yeah. I can see why people would want to control and manipulate that.
Yeah.
What is your idea for your next book?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so my next book has been 1,000,000 years in gestation. I think the big shift between my last book and this book is motherhood. And how motherhood has like sharpened me, I mean, almost immediately after my first son was born, I've got 2 kids, boys 13 and 8 years old. And immediately I realized, like, whoa, my time is not my time anymore. I had to figure out how to work faster. I had to figure out how to maximize time. I had to figure out how to be in 2 places at once. I had to figure out how to manage a household. I had to figure out how to make sure that this child is cared for, whether I'm there, whether I'm not there, right? So all of a sudden it was like my life kind of became, I went from being like this single entity to being this entity that has all these different arms, apart from all the creative arms that we wear, right? And I think, and for me, that was an empowering experience. I feel it's been an empowering experience. My children are my greatest teacher. They are, I feel like kids are like small ancestors here on earth, constantly showing you who you are. I see my demons in my children. I see all the things I see, all the things I struggle with. There it is in an 8-year-old body and a 13-year-old body showing me. It's all me. I mean, I think parenting is a calling, and that like being an artist, so mothering sharpened all the other things that matter to me, my spirituality, my activism, my love for the arts. My children are very creative, so I'm looking at these people and I'm like, oh my God, you're gonna be you're gonna do this, you're gonna do this. And I can't react the way that my family reacted.
No,
and God bless them, they reacted out of ignorance. I can't do the same as much as I'm afraid. So we have to have real conversations, but also they see what I go through when I audition and I don't get the part. They see what I go through, how much prep goes into one show. They see how long it takes to develop a script. They see my anxiety about presenting a script. They see all of it.
And yet we would do it over and over and over
again. And over and over again. So the journey of the next book is the journey of adulting.
And mommyhood. I love that. That's going to be the next book. We can't wait to see what your next project is going to be. The next piece of poetry is going to be your next performance, because I have to say, everybody on this show, we are huge fans. Lebo Mashile, this is Reality Radio. Join us again next Friday night between 6 and 7 p.m. My name is Devnarain. Have a great weekend.